Martin Chuzzlewit has been raised by his grandfather and namesake. Years before, Martin Sr. took the precaution of raising an orphaned girl, Mary Graham, to be his companion and nursemaid, with the understanding that she will receive income from him only as long as Martin Sr. lives. Old Martin considers that this gives her a motive to keep him alive. In contrast to his relatives, who want to inherit his money, his grandson Martin falls in love with Mary and wishes to marry her. Conflicting with old Martin's plans, Martin and his grandfather argue, each too proud to yield to a resolution. Martin leaves home to live on his own and old Martin disinherits him. Udharan Chenne. Martin becomes an apprentice, at the late age of 21, to Seth Pecksniff, a relative and greedy architect. Instead of teaching his students, he lives off their tuition fees and has them do drafting work that he passes off as his own. He has two spoiled daughters, Charity and Mercy, nicknamed Cherry and Mary. Pecksniff takes Martin on to establish closer ties with his wealthy grandfather. Young Martin befriends Tom Pinch, a kind-hearted soul whose late grandmother gave Pecksniff all she had, in the belief that Pecksniff would make an architect and a gentleman of him. Pinch is incapable of believing any of the bad things others tell him of Pecksniff, and always defends him vociferously. Pinch works for exploitatively low wages while believing that he is the unworthy recipient of Pecksniff's charity, rather than a man of many talents. Martin spends 1 week at the house of Pecksniff, alone with Tom, as the family spends the week in London. Martin draws the designs for a school during that week. When old Martin learns of his grandson's new life, he asks that Pecksniff kick young Martin out. When Pecksniff returns, they argue and Martin leaves, once again to make his way alone. Soon, old Martin and Mary arrive in the area. He seems to fall under Pecksniff's control. During this time, Pinch falls in love with Mary, who loves to hear him play the organ, but does not declare his feelings, both because of his shyness and because he knows she is attached to young Martin. Pecksniff decides that Mary should be his next wife, and rudely quotes her. Old Martin's brother, Anthony Chuzzlewit, is in business with his son, Jonas. Despite their considerable wealth, they are miserly and cruel. Jonas, eager for the old man to die so that he can inherit, constantly berates his father. Anthony dies abruptly and under suspicious circumstances, leaving his wealth to Jonas. Jonas then woos Cherry, while arguing constantly with Mary. He then abruptly declares to Pecksniff that he wants to marry Mary and jilts Cherry, not without demanding an additional £1,000 on top of the £4,000 that Pecksniff has promised him as Cherry's dowry, with the argument that Cherry has better chances for matchmaking. Udharan Chenne. Jonas becomes entangled with the unscrupulous Montague Tigg, formerly a petty thief and hanger-on of a Chuzzlewit relative, Chevy Slime, and joins in Tigg's crooked insurance business. As Martin raises funds in London, Tigg cheats young Martin at the pawn shop of the full value of his valuable pocket watch. Tigg uses the funds to transform himself into a con man with a new personal appearance, calls himself Tigg Montague, and rents a fine office. This new image convinces investors that he is an important businessman from whom they may greatly profit. At this time, Pecksniff, in front of old Martin, orders Tom Pinch out of his house. Tom Pinch abruptly sees the true character of his employer, and goes to London to seek new employment. He meets John Westlock in London, a good friend. Tom Pinch rescues his sister Ruth from mistreatment by the family that employs her as a governess, and the two rent rooms in Islington. Pinch quickly receives an ideal job from a mysterious employer with the help of an equally mysterious Mr. Phipps. Young Martin, meanwhile, has encountered Mark Tapley, who is always cheerful, jolly, In his own words, Mark is happy at the inn where he works, which he decides does not reflect well on him because it shows no strength of character to be happy. When one has good fortune, Mark leaves his employment and heads to London to find a situation to test his cheerfulness by maintaining it in worse circumstances. To this end he accompanies young Martin to the United States to seek their fortunes, with Mark calling Martin, "Sir," and doing Martin's bidding. An easy relationship for Martin. Martin believes the words of men in New York selling land unseen along a major American river, thinking that place will need an architect for new buildings. Despite the views of Mr. Bevan, whom they met in New York upon arrival, they travel by train and river boat first to purchase the land at the office in the city up the river. They proceed to Eden, a swampy, disease-filled settlement. They find it nearly empty of people or buildings as previous settlers mainly died. Mark aids a couple who watch their children die in Eden. Then Martin, soon followed by Mark, fall ill of malaria. Mark decides that being with Martin and being in Eden is a situation in which it can be considered a virtue to remain in good spirits. The grim experience of Eden, with Mark nursing Martin back to health, and then Martin nursing Mark from the illness, changes Martin's selfish character. He understands when Mark suggests that he could get on better terms with his grandfather by apologizing. The men return to England, where Martin seeks reconciliation with his grandfather, who is still with Pecksniff. His grandfather hears them, and agrees to repay Mr. Bevan in New York for the fare of the journey back to England. Martin reunites with Tom Pinch in London, and meets John Westlock. Old Martin Chuzzlewit shows himself at Tom Pinch office, revealing himself as the mysterious employer. Old Martin has been pretending to be enthralled to Pecksniff, while keeping up with other, more important members of his extended family. While Martin was in America, a witness came forward to John Westlock who believed Jonas had killed his own father. Using drugs the witness gave him in trade for erasing a gambling debt. Chaffee, who survives his master Anthony Chuzzlewit, had seen the drugs and prevented Jonas from using them on his father, who died a natural death. The London police, including Chevy Slime, nephew of Old Martin, have discovered the body of Tig Montague and have the benefit of the information gathered by Montague's investigator Nadgett to know the murderer. At the home shared by Jonas and his wife Mary and Mr. Chaffee, the police and old Chuzzlewit confront Jonas. Jonas is saved of the charge of murdering his father by Chaffee's story. Jonas is taken for the murder of Montague, who had fooled him and taken his money. Montague's one true partner escaped with the funds on hand out of England. Old Martin has taken Mary Pecksniff Chuzzlewit under his protection, as she was an abused wife, with none of her happy ways left. Udharan Chinne. Old Martin, with his grandson, Mary and Tom Pinch, confront Pecksniff with their knowledge of his true character. Pecksniff has lost all his funds, as he was taken in by Jonas and Montague. Only his eldest daughter, a shrew who had been jilted on her wedding day, is left to him. Old Martin reveals that he was angry at his grandson for becoming engaged to Mary because he had planned to arrange that particular match himself, and felt that his glory had been thwarted by their action. Martin and his grandfather are reconciled, and Martin and Mary are married, as are Ruth Pinch and John Westlock, another former student of Pecksniff. Tom Pinch remains in unrequited love with Mary for the rest of his life, never marrying, and always being a warm companion to Mary. Martin, Ruth and John, who now knows his value and his skills,